Hello everyone, and thank you so much for watching my video on how to make a buttonhole. Today I'm going to show you two different ways on how to sew a buttonhole. I'm going to show you how to sew one with a zigzag stitch as well as with a machine programmed buttonhole stitch. Also, if you're new to my channel, what I do is I post how to sew videos as well as post a sew along once a month for us to do together. If you would like to see more how to sew videos from me, please give this video a thumbs up as well as hit the subscribe button in the corner. Now let's get started with the zigzag buttonhole first. Okay, so for the first buttonhole that we are going to do is the zigzag buttonhole stitch. So to get an accurate buttonhole measurement, what we are going to do is we're going to lay down our button here. And we are going to use some chalk just to mark out the width of the button. I would suggest using something washable or iron away, just because this is going to be on the top of your material, so you don't want it to be showing after. So now that we have our width, what we are going to do is we are going to draw a straight line down the middle. So now we have our buttonhole guide here. So now I'm going to take it to the sewing machine. So this is the machine that I'm going to be using for the zigzag buttonhole stitch. It's a Pfaff Ambition 1.5. So right now I just have it as a straight stitch. So I'm going to change it to a zigzag stitch, which is number 5 for this machine. So you can see here that the standard setting that it's set to is 4 for the width and 3 for the stitch length. But I'm going to change that. For my for my stitch length, I want it to be a 0.6. So it's going to be really close together. And then for my width, I want it to be a 2. If you want a thicker or more bold buttonhole, I would probably go with maybe a 2.5 or a 3. But 2 is going to give a nice thin line for the buttonhole. And so now we are going to get started on sewing the buttonhole. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be starting in the middle, and I'm going to be working my way down, going across, coming back up, and then across once more, and back down to the middle. I like to start in the middle just because it gives it a little bit of a nicer finish. Also, another thing to keep in mind while you're sewing is that you want to make sure that you're leaving a big enough space in between the 2 stitches on either side, so then we can cut into it to make the buttonhole. If you sew too close to one another, what's going to happen is when you make your snip, you're going to actually snip the thread of the stitch, and it will unravel and it's not going to be a good buttonhole. So now I am going to get started. So what I like to do personally is that I have a red line here for my edge stitch. I like to have that red line on the outside of the mark that I made. And then I'm just going to start sewing. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift my presser foot up while my needle is down, and I'm going to pivot my fabric around. Now I'm going to bring my needle up, and I'm going to place it down almost to the fabric, just so then I can see whereabouts it's going to start sewing, so I can make sure that it's lined up properly. And I am going to repeat this method for the next 4 corners. And I kind of overlapped my stitch a little bit. Cut off my thread, and here we have the buttonhole. So I find that these ones can sometimes get a little bit wonky or they're not exactly the best, but they do the purpose if you don't have a sewing machine with a buttonhole option, or if it's broken and you just want to use the zigzag stitch. So now I'm going to cut the hole in the buttonhole here. With this one, I am going to show you the stitch ripper method. You're going to put the pin through your fabric very close to the edge of the buttonhole. And you're going to do this on both sides. What this is going to do is it's going to prevent you from stitch ripping too far into the stitch. So now I'm going to put my stitch ripper in, and I'm just going to tear it up. Now when you're stitch ripping the hole, you want to make sure that you're not stitch ripping the zigzag stitch on the side. And now we have our buttonhole. Now onto the programmed buttonhole stitch. I'm going to be using this Singer Esteem number 2. I just personally like the button stitch on this one better than my Pfaff machine. For this video, I am not going to show you how to set up your buttonhole for your sewing machine, just because every sewing machine is different, and I highly recommend that you use your manual that's given to you with your machine to set up your buttonhole stitch. Though if you are having a really hard time trying to figure out how to set up your buttonhole stitch, please comment below and I will try to help you through it. So now I am going to show you how to use the buttonhole presser foot on my machine to sew a buttonhole. So the first thing is that I'm going to show you how to use the buttonhole presser foot. So I have everything on my machine all set up besides the button. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place the button in the top part of the buttonhole presser foot. And there's this little lever right here, and I'm just going to clamp it down on it. Now on some machines, doing this part here will be fairly accurate and you can just get started. But I know my machine fairly well, and I know that when I put in the button and I use this guide, the buttonhole is going to be too big. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take out my button and I'm going to put it down maybe 4 or 5 clicks. So this here should be okay. My button is no longer going to fit into it, so I don't have to have my button in the back anymore. So I would also highly suggest that you do a test run on a separate piece of fabric, something that's fairly similar to the garment that you're sewing, just because sometimes the buttonhole doesn't quite work out the first time. So at least if you do a test run, it will be perfect for the garment that you are sewing. So now to get started on my buttonhole, what I'm going to do is I'm going to push this forward all the way until it stops. I'm going to keep holding it while I place my fabric under, and then I'm going to put down my presser foot. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my needle down into my fabric, and I am going to start sewing. So what I have to do on my machine at this point is I have to press the reverse button, which is right here, and I'm going to hold that down. Now what it's going to do is it's going to go back and forth in the front here for a little bit, and then it's going to start going backwards. Now once I hit the end here, I'm going to release that. And I don't know if you can see from in the video here that these zigzag stitches are quite thick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go around one more time to make sure that it's very secure. So now that I'm done, I'm going to lift up my presser foot. And now we got our buttonhole. So you can see that it's much bigger than the one that we did. So what I'm thinking is that the buttonhole that I actually did is going to be way too big, but we will find out. So for this buttonhole here, we are going to open it up a little bit differently than the other one. So this here is called a buttonhole cutter. I've come across this when I was in high school, and honestly, these are a savior, especially when you're doing a whole lot of buttons. So how this works is what you're going to do is you're going to put this flat piece, this flat sharp piece, in between your stitches. And then you're going to use a hammer or a rubber mallet, and you're just going to whack the top of it. And you're going to slide it over and repeat the process. And there we have it. Now we have cut the hole in this buttonhole. What I like about this buttonhole cutter is that it's a lot less likely that you actually cut into your thread like I did on this side here. And now we are going to check to see if our button goes through. And it definitely does. This buttonhole for sure is too big. So like I said before, you definitely want to do a test run before you sew your garment because it might not work out. And that is it. Now you know how to sew a buttonhole in 2 different ways. You know how to sew one in the zigzag stitch as well as a programmed buttonhole stitch. Again, if you do need help with your buttonhole stitch on your machine, please comment below and I will try to help you through it. Also, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, as well as subscribe to my channel for more how to sew videos. I hope you all have a great day. See you soon!